I am Bombburst. I bid you welcome to my summer home. Happy Halloween, Generation 1 Transformer fans. I guess he's not a fan of the season. This is Sparkster 1701, and when we get our star back up, I told you not to hit the candy you get hard. We're going to take a look this Halloween at the last one for Pretender Month, the Generation 1 Decepticon Predator Bombburst. Now, Bombburst was released in 1988. He was part of the first wave of the Pretenders, and he would be discontinued, unfortunately, in 1989, and we did not get a replacement for him. Bombburst made very few appearances in the media. He would probably make some appearances in the comic book. By then, the cartoon was canceled in America, but he did have a prominent role in the Japanese Master Force series. And in the rather poor English-made dub that was available for a lot of years, he and his fellow Pretenders on the Decepticon side were very colorful characters, particularly in their language. Okay, before our friend here decides to throw another party in the summer home and pass out on us again, either that or he's not too fond of all the sunlight and the lamps we got shining on him, let's take a look at Bombburst himself. He's pretty standard when it comes to the Pretenders, although he does have a little bit more on the articulation in the fact that his head can be rotated all the way around if you so choose. He does have articulation at the shoulder, so he can rotate his arms all the way around, which is pretty useful for him since of him having his guns mounted on his arms instead of properly holding them. He has a joint at the hip that pretty much allows him to bring his legs up and do some stylized kicks. And he has a joint at the ankle, so we can take that even further. Now it appears he does have a joint there at his knee, but it makes his knees bend the opposite way. As a robot, he does look kind of on the fierce side, at least. But he's also invariably going to draw some comparisons to the earlier shown Bugley, due to the fact they both hold their guns in the exact same way. We're going to take this moment now. We're going to transform Bombburst into his alternate mode. We start by removing him of his guns. Then next, we raise his arms up into the typical I surrender pose. If he falls down anymore, he's going to. Then we fold in his feet, like so. And then we rotate his legs up onto his chest. Adjust the knees so that they fold totally flat against him, like so. And then now, we grab onto this little tab here on the back of his head and pull out the rear tail fin. And then reattach his guns onto his arms. And then he becomes what's more or less become a staple of the Pretender flyers, a hoverjet. But at least Bombburst does add a little bit of credence to it. He does have some fan jets molded here on his backside, so at least if nothing else, he does add a little bit of credit to it. And he can be held reasonably well one-handed, so he does have some swooshing action going for him. So yeah, that does work out for him. He does. Well, it's still not as impressive as as a lot of the other pretenders. He at least makes something of an effort, so we'll give him an A for effort and maybe a C plus for the actual effect. Now, to put Bomb Burst into his Pretender shell, we first get him back into the robot mode, as you can see he is right now. We start by turning his head all the way around for whatever reason. His arms need to be folded up onto his chest, and you fold his feet down flat. And we separate the Pretender shell into the two pieces. Stick him, I think we'll stick him into the front shell. It's a little bit deeper in here. Get him inside there. And then, very gently and carefully, attach the back side of the shell. He's going to fight with me here, folks. Maybe we should put him in the other way. Yeah, they got it listed backwards there in the instructions. Pardon me, folks. I should point out on him that the shoulder pads and his belt are removable, but unlike many of the other pretenders, the belt isn't used to hold the shell closed. He holds himself closed pretty well. Next, we add on his weaponry. He's got an axe, which we'll put here in his right hand. And for his guns, well, his guns, as you can see here on the bottom, have assortments of holes along with the posts. You just line it up so that a post and hole go together. And he's got some sort of funky little weapon here, all merged together. And we just insert that into his other hand. And here you have this weird, freakish looking bat creature. And unfortunately, when it comes to articulation for him, he's pretty much the same as all the other humanoid-shaped pretenders. You can move their arms about so far. So you can use it to aim his guns, or probably more playfully, chop with the axe. Bomb burst, chop! Cha, cha, cha. Moving right along now, we will take a look at Bomb Burst's accessories, and as you can see, he does have a fair amount of accessories for a pretender. We'll start by taking a look at the pieces of his shell. This is the completely undressed version of the front side of the shell. Kind of looks almost worse without all the accessories. Thing you definitely want to make sure you watch for is for any signs of paint wear on the chest armor. As you can see, there's a little bit right there on mine. And another thing to check is the posts here on the side of his waist, since that's where his belt connects. As you can imagine, the plastic on these is rather thin, so be very cautious at how often you need to take his belt off of him. Since the shell doesn't need the belt to hold it together, you really shouldn't need to take his belt off of him. And that would be the thing I would recommend so that you don't break it, don't break the posts. Right here's the rear portion of the shell. It's pretty plain by comparison. It does continue the wrappings for the leg armor that he has. As you can see, he has a rocket pack on his back instead of bat wings. So in some ways, he's kind of cheating if he's using that to fly. Moving right along, we have the aforementioned belt. It's kind of a creepy looking little belt. since the buckle on here almost looks like it's some sort of evil symbol or probably a weird alien-like face. But it serves its purpose. Next, something that a lot of people probably aren't aware of, since it's not mentioned even in the instructions, is his shoulder armor. These are basically the wings that appear on his shoulders. They clip on through these little posts on the backside to the holes on the shell itself. Again, they really don't serve any purpose other than to just be shoulder armor, and they really aren't intended to be removed very often. It's probably why they're not listed in the instructions, but since they do come off very, very easily, they can easily be lost, so definitely keep an eye out when you're buying a loose bomb burst, folks. And next, we have his battle axe. Or so they say it is. Almost reminds me of a pickaxe of sorts. I think it would look better if this was all one large solid blade instead of the two thin blades, but whatever. At least it does have this hand guard on the front, so he can use it to fight. He can fight with it pretty easily. The plastic on it is kind of on the thin side, so it does bend easily. As you can kind of see here, mine leans a little bit towards the right. So if that's something you're picky about, otherwise you can bend it back into shape relatively easily, but unless you're real picky about that sort of thing, it's not really that big of a deal. Then he has these two wing/lasers. As you saw, these broad pieces here do double as the wings for the hover jet. It should have a small post on the one side that connects onto Bomb Burst's shoulders, and these large posts can be used to hold the guns on the Pretender shell. You want to make sure the small ones aren't broken, since as you can imagine, they probably get pretty stress-worn if they're mishandled when they're in the combined Pretender mode. Now these guns are exactly the same, no matter what, which is a bit odd for many of the Pretenders, but that's something that you can easily acquire if you're looking for the loose parts. You can see they're more or less same on both sides. And that's all the pieces Bomb Burst has. Moving right along now, we will take a look at Bomb Burst's instructions. Now, this was done in the new style that they were doing for them in 1988, including a special logo for the Transformer Pretenders. It has him here in the shell mode. Unfortunately, instead of a nice fantasy pose, they've got him in the traditional I'm a dork looking pose that the shells unfortunately suffer from. And over here we got a picture of the robot, kind of in a stiff looking pose, which unfortunately the toy suffers from. And over here we got the loose parts. Again, like mentioned last week, it's definitely good to pay attention to my reviews since I show every loose piece, whereas the instructions don't always, since they do not list the shoulder armor up here as being detachable. And down here it shows you how to attach the guns to the robot. Pretty simple. And then start transforming him into his hover jet mode. Over here to the end. Flip him around. And finish hover jet. And then start to put him inside the Pretender shell. They've got him shown in here going in backwards, which kind of didn't work out so well. But as you saw, just simply turning him around and he went inside pretty easily here. Small error on Hasbro's part, but forgivable. Right here we got the stickers, as you can see. Didn't have a whole lot. And we get here to the robot points. They still were offering us robot points, but there really wasn't any offers, except for any that might have been carried over from 1987. There were no new ones offered in 1988. And then right here we have the tech spec instructions on how to read them. Speaking of his tech specs, we've got his tech spec right here. It's got a nice little picture of him over here on the side that would have been on the front of the box. In typical fashion for the Pretenders, they would show the shell, the robot, and the alternate mode. It's done in purple to show he's a Decepticon, even lists that as his faction. It gives his name as Bombburst and lists his function as Predator. As we all know, in the wild, animals are described as either prey or predators, so that kind of gives you a notion as to what kind of creature he is. But they may also be trying to emulate the creature from the now famous Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. It also gives his motto as, "The greater the foe, the sweeter his fuel." A vicious, vile, automated vampire. Perfect for Halloween, isn't he? Enjoys swooping down on unsuspecting Autobots and using his serrated metal fangs to drain the fuel from his victims. Specially textured outer shell causes rust rash on contact. Blinded by bright sunlight. The ultimate terror in darkness. Without shell, transforms into a vertical takeoff and landing hover jet with dual lasers. Within shell, armed with corrosive slime shooter and armor-piercing battle axe. So he sounds like he's either a rather fearsome character or a reject from a horror movie. We'll lay the tech spec decoder over his specs, and as you can see, he's got some relatively impressive stats. It lists his strength and his intelligence at 8, his speed is 7, his endurance is 4, his rank is 7, his courage is 9, his firepower is 7, and his skill is 8. So, aside from rather low endurance, especially it probably gets lower if he's in sunlight, he's a pretty powerful character. Probably fitting to be next in line to be Count Dracula. Think he'll either make an appearance in a Universal Studio movie or a Castlevania game. Now we get down to what do I think of him. I find Bombburst to be a rather interesting character of sorts. The only appearance that I've never liked about him was the poor fan dub from the UK that was done on Master Force, since he pretty much came off as a bumbling idiot and enjoyed swearing a lot at the Autobots. The More Than Meets the Eye guide describes him as a loner who hunts from the shadows. He enjoys silently stalking groups of Autobots, picking them off one by one and dragging them into the dark to drain them of energon, and sometimes even leaving their bodies out for others to find later, or just to keep them hidden to creep out the Autobots that are hunting for him. So this more or less makes him a horror movie character, almost similar in vein to the many slashers that we have out there. So we can almost picture him as being like the next Wretch for him. Or we could always have him go as one of my favorites, Scissorman from the vintage Clock Tower video game. Boy, he's pretty much your typical Pretender. So the vehicle mode is not going to impress, and the shell being very experienced. But I'm still going to put him in the middle tier, maybe a little up towards the top, just due to the excellent characterization that they have for him. While he may not be the creature from Predator, he does come off pretty well as a bundle of the various horror movie tropes, and that makes him a little more interesting and a little more fun to play with. And that concludes my review of the Generation 1 Decepticon Predator Bomb Burst. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up here on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Please post and share a comment, and share this video with others to help keep this channel going. This is Sparkster1701 saying I thank you all for joining me here on Pretender Month, and next month we're going to start getting back to some normal Transformers. So we will catch you all later.